Hello and welcome to another edition of the Mayor Dan Paletko Show. I'm very pleased to have as my guest today a very interesting man who deals with the area of disasters, so be prepared what we're going to talk about today. But Mark Hammond, you're the Monroe County Emergency Manager, but you were in Wayne County for a long time, so welcome as my guest.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And one of the things we're going to talk about as our everyday lives go on, we probably don't spend a lot of time thinking of potential disasters that could take place, and we don't foresee one ever happening. But we're going to talk about that plant that's along Lake Erie in Monroe, and that's the Fermi plant that's run by DTE. So you, as I understand it, we had some people from Dearborn Heights that participated. You just done a test if something was to go wrong at the Fermi plant. So what could go wrong?
Oh, the list is endless.
Okay.
What can go wrong there? But basically what we try to do is be prepared for specific things, but general things as well. And depending on the hazard that comes out of that nuclear power plant, we're always looking at one thing: protecting the public, how that public is going to be taken care of. Everything else, that human commodity is what we really look at, and we want to make sure that they're protected. So the majority of our efforts are focused in public protection. And it's a true regional approach. If something happens of that scale, of a nuclear power plant disaster in Monroe County, I'll be the first one to let you know is we don't have enough assets to take care of that, whether it's public safety, public health. We just don't have that. So that's why we rely on our partners to the north. It is very comforting to know that we have the kind of quality people here in Dearborn Heights that can come into an EOC and perform, whether it's their EOC or another county's EOC, and perform flawlessly. The Federal Emergency Management Agency evaluates us every 2 years on our preparedness plans, and this was that 2-year evaluation.
Now, those of us that live in Dearborn Heights, I would think probably it may be a 30-minute trip down Telegraph to I-75, but we're probably closer than that because the effects would be as a bird flies and not necessarily taking road routes to get to the plant.
You're absolutely right. You aren't in the direct path, as we call it, or the plume area, but you are in something we call an emergency planning zone.
Okay.
And that goes 50 miles out from the plant. So all the way up into Oakland County, well down into Ohio, and all the way out into Lenawee County in western side of Michigan. So we do encompass quite a large area. And that's if the toothpaste gets out of the tube, so to speak, in a catastrophic sense. And this is carried by the wind, it's carried by birds, animals, vehicle travel. That's why we have a 50-mile zone that we're going to be concerned about. Agricultural items in those areas would have to be screened before they're consumed. That's where you see the 50 miles. The 10 miles around the plant is where you actually have the plume, or the smoke cloud, let's call it. And that's where the radiological particles would be deposited in that plume. And that plume, again, encompasses most of Monroe County, 4 cities in southern Wayne County, and part of Ohio. So it's kind of it's a small area but very concentrated. There's about 100,000 people in the 10-mile EPZ around the power plant, the emergency planning zone around the power plant. And we do ongoing training with them in our off Fermi years. So we have every 2 years FEMA comes in and does training, but we'll do training on those off Fermi years with local jurisdictions, local communities. For example, a community like Monroe is affected inside that EPZ. Can you imagine, Mr. Mayor, if your city hall had to be moved and you had to have business somewhere else for a month, 2 months, maybe an extended period of time? Well, that's the kind of training that we do. They have significant plans, not only for their continuity of governance in those jurisdictions, but also alternate locations. And occasionally we'll test those alternate locations. Schools are another prime example. We don't want to, even though there's a nuclear power plant emergency, we have to return to normal as soon as possible. So we want to make sure that the schools are able to be absorbed into other school districts and move out. So there's been extensive plans in our off years that we work with Jefferson schools, airport schools, and the Monroe schools to have other host schools that will take them in, try to keep that education process going. So it's an orchestra, and leading all those groups is very interesting, and it's very rewarding to see the community come together. And that's just in our region. The state plays a huge role with all the state agencies, and as well as the federal government would come in at that time. I can't speak highly enough about the power plant that does a yeoman's job of anything we need for that nuclear power plant protection, where there's public protection, monitoring equipment. They're standing right up and making sure that everything we need is taken care of, and that they perform to a level that we're expecting as well.
And we hope it never happens, but we think of in the past Fukushima, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, and so there have been these incidents. Are we in the iodine tablet zone or not?
The Ki, or potassium iodide, that you're talking about, is able to block the radioactive iodine into your thyroid.
Yep.
So if you are susceptible to that, it's something you can get from Myers or Kroger's. And is it part of a preparedness kit that you would have in your home? Definitely in the 10-mile EPZ.
Yeah.
If you're going to be in the 50-mile, that probably wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah.
But the thing about that is not getting into that position where you have the radioactive iodine uptake there. But you're absolutely right. That is a big part of this whole process is public preparedness, knowing what to do. We talked about the schools, we talked about the businesses, we talked about some of the municipalities, but the public is the key. What are we going to do with the public? Where are you going to go if you can't go back to your house for a day or two? And that goes in any disaster. As emergency managers, that's what we plan for. And with September being preparedness month, we want to make sure that everybody thinks about that. That if a nuclear power plant event probably isn't going to affect Dearborn Heights too much, but flooding does.
Flooding definitely does. We always, and I hired some years ago when I first became mayor, an emergency manager, so Bob Bancrap, and he has, for our public, we actually have a plan that if City Hall was to get shut down, we already have another location. We've made the outreach with, for instance, a group that really does a lot of work. God bless them, is the Salvation Army.
Absolutely.
And we partnered with the Salvation Army. We have one of their churches located in Dearborn Heights, but they do a lot of good in connections with disasters. Flooding is one that we always, we know too well. And whenever it rains, Bob's out there checking the maps. And his contacts at the Meteorological Association, and we're just praying that we don't get more than an inch of rain.
We all call Bob. Bob's our contact, our
Okay.
go-to guy when something happens. I worked in Wayne County and was very, very happy to have Bob as part of our team here, and good grab, by the way. He's known throughout the state as being a very stellar emergency manager. And that's part of it, is to have that plan B guy. As the mayor, that's got to be very comforting that if something happens, that you've got people in your administration that can reach back and say, okay, what if this happens? Now what do we do? Where do we go? And to have those plans drafted in place and at least know that these facilities are capable of handling you. And the public is reaching out to the public with informational shows like this is part of that preparedness, is really to make sure the public knows whether they're at home, whether they're traveling, in their cars, what to do when they hear that emergency alert broadcast or when severe weather threatens, what to do. And Dearborn Heights does a great job of reaching out to their public.
Thank you.
When I was here in Wayne County, I used to kid about the don't make me know your name, because I don't want to know your name, because if I don't know your name, then you're not a problem.
Yeah.
You haven't had any problems and you're prepared and ready to go. So as the emergency manager for the county, it was comforting. I didn't have to worry about Dearborn Heights. I knew the guy in Dearborn Heights, and I knew that I didn't have to call him, although I knew his name really well because I called him for favors all the time. But any time that there was a need, when Dearborn Heights called, we knew that it was everything that they could possibly do as a community was done, and they needed the county or the state or the federal assistance to deal with the flooding, to deal with the storms, with whatever's happening.
And we always received a great amount of help and assistance from Wayne County, and so I've always been pleased with that effort. It reminds me, as we were doing this show just a couple weeks ago, watching, and I guess I'm kind of a fan sometimes of old TV shows, but there were some old Twilight Zones, and what I had forgotten is, as a young boy, I remember doing these drills where we got underneath the desk in school, and I don't think they do these anymore, but one of them I saw, the gentleman had built a complete bomb shelter in his basement, but it took me back, because in the late 50s and early 60s, these were real concerns. I don't know how many of our neighbors had bomb shelters, but there were people who literally built these bomb shelters in case, and stocked them with food and everything else. And so
the threat was different. That was the Cold War.
Cold War,
and that was
different threat, but there still is a need. Even, I know that we've run shows on here with the upcoming Be Prepared, but having first aid kits in cases of fire stuff, knowing where the family members, take that for granted. But the fact of the matter is, we've shown up at fires, and then it's like, where's Susie? Where is, and a family that prepares, we're all going to meet in the backyard, or we're all going to meet in the front yard and make sure everybody's okay. It's extremely important to talk about and to run a simple drill at home.
It's huge, and the first responders will be there, but we in emergency management look as first responders a little broader. We think police, fire, EMS as first responders.
Yep.
Those first responders are moms and dads, cousins, neighbors,
Yes.
who really are the first responders. They're the ones that are going to be first there if you have an emergency in your neighborhood, if you have an emergency in your home. And to have those kind of plans, exactly what you talked about, meet at the big oak tree on the corner,
Yep.
those are just critically important. And if you're away from home and disaster strikes, where are you going to meet? We're going to go to Uncle Charlie's house. That's where we're all going to meet up. Or call Uncle Charlie and let Uncle Charlie know you're all right. Mm-hmm. Those kind of things are paramount, and it keeps all of us, gives us a little more sense of security. And you talked about the programs, the ready.gov program that FEMA offers, NOAA weather radios in your homes. Mm-hmm. Being prepared makes it so much better. The 72-hour kit with water and food and the pet stuff. Everybody has their animals. We had quite a conversation at the last Fermi drill about what about pets? What are we going to do with pets? Where are they going to go? Well, they can't go into all the shelters, but in Monroe County we have a shelter especially designed for pets.
Wow.
That will take pets. They can't come into the shelter specifically with the evacuee, but they can be housed in a large agricultural building they have out back, food and water, they can walk them anytime, stuff like that. So there is a mechanism for that, but unless you plan for that as a homeowner, bring the leashes, bring their favorite, dog bed or dog blanket with them. Cats are kind of finicky sometimes when you try to move them without carriers. Have those kind of things as part of your plan. That way you can evacuate. You're not going to worry about Fluffy or Spot leaving them at home. And we found a lot of people not willing to leave because they can't take their pets with them.
That's important. I remember that in my household, when we had a dog, my daughters insisted at each of the door entrance there was a note in case of fire or police that dog inside, Speedy, and that was important. But they are part of the family, and it is just a few minutes of being prepared makes all the difference. Unfortunately, fortunately I get an opportunity of riding with the police and fire. But unfortunate situation is that you show up someplace and where something could have been handled real quickly, and everybody's scrambling. Where's the bandages? Where's the fire extinguisher? Didn't we put that in here? And it's like, it ought to be checked, because the other thing, or they have a fire extinguisher that's 20 years old, and you look at the thing and say, wow, they haven't sold those kind of fire extinguishers. I'm not even sure how those old ones work. and those are the things that, with September coming up, it's important to check and do that checklist. And like you say, that FEMA website, I haven't been on it recently, but I'm going to go back on it, has a nice checklist, how to be prepared. And really, it takes a few minutes, but then you're prepared in case.
And not only do we prepare them as far as pets and people, but we know we flood. Unfortunately, southeastern Michigan floods. So maybe not store things in your basement that are important. I can remember working with your community, one of the floods that we had, and that was the common theme, that they had stored their important papers in the basement.
Yep.
And now they're destroyed. Well, you need to think about that, and you need not only to have those important papers ready to go in case of a disaster, so you can grab a tote with important papers in it, and out the door you go, and maybe keep them on a second floor, above the ground floor of your house, so that if you do get floodwaters, we know it's going to happen here. They're going to be a little protected. Prepare your home a little bit as well for the inevitable. We know that's going to happen. You talked about the 50s and building those fallout shelters. I was able to, I was kind of a historian, and I was able to find some old films of duck and cover, old training that they used to give the kids. There's a little turtle that would, if there was something, he'd hide in his shell and he'd be all safe. And it showed how to hide under your desk and things like that, specifically with the Cold War in mind. And people took stock in that and actually, you said, built their homes with those safe rooms in them. Again, completely different reason why they built them. But we as emergency managers are pushing people back to having safe rooms in their homes. Homes aren't built to have strong winds hit it. Even though you have a brick home, there's absolutely no way to protect that brick home from a Category 5 hurricane or a EF5 tornado. It's just not going to happen. But they can build safe rooms in homes now relatively inexpensively, and there's grants going around now through the Federal Emergency Management Agency that will allow, in new construction and some retrofit construction, these safe rooms. And they're saving lives. They're finding, that wherever those tornadoes, wherever those storms hit, with these safe rooms, they started out in the 50s, but they're still valuable today. Concrete walls, concrete floor, it's not pretty to look at, but at least you'll be, that human commodity, that most precious thing that we try to protect as emergency managers is going to be protected inside that building. And you can also use it for other things. You can use it for a playroom, a storage room, something like that, but know that during an emergency that it's there to use and to be able to go somewhere safe for those type of disasters.
Yeah, it's surprising. I still remember as a little boy that I grew up right around Lovegood Park in Dearborn, and we all went out as a picnic. So there was probably, back then most moms stayed at home, so there's probably 20, 30 kids and 5 moms. And all of a sudden the area started to get dark in Lovegood Park, and it didn't take very long, and I still remember they took all of us, put us in the restroom, and that was all we had as shelter. But hearing that noise of that freight train type noise, I'll never forget that, even though that happened, I was probably 8 or 9 years of age.
Humbling.
But I remember that, and then we came out, and maybe 10, 15 big trees were all overturned. Our area was fine. They shoved us in, they didn't want us to look outside, so I don't know exactly what was flying by, if anything, but it came so quick. We went from nice sunny weather to this really tornado condition in a very quick period of time. The mothers decided there's not enough time to walk 3 or 4 blocks to get home.
No.
We've got to get the shelter right then. So these things come, and to be prepared and to have that area of the house to protect you may save your life.
It sounds like you had a very good upbringing and very smart upbringing, because that's one of the things we coach as emergency managers is be cognizant of your surroundings. Know that ahead of time. If you go to the same dog park, if you go to the same park with your children, look around and see if there was bad weather, where can I go? Where's the closest library? Senior centers. All those community-based buildings that may have safe rooms in them that are available for you to go into in inclement weather. And those are critically important. And know where you live. Not everybody gets to live in a, brick, mansion. Some people live in apartment buildings that may be on second, third, fourth floors.
Some don't have basements.
Manufactured homes are huge in southeastern
Yes.
Michigan.
Yes.
Know that if you hear severe weather coming, that you're going to have to take different steps than somebody with a safe room in their house that's going to have somewhere to go in a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see the steps that have been taken in the 50s are now starting to come back as being real good preparedness tips for now in this time.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that we have a CERT program in the city, and we realize we just don't have enough first responders. I mean, at any point in time, I may have 25, 30 policemen and firemen on duty, but a disaster, a plane going down, we get a lot of airplane traffic. I must share this with you, but having lived here most of my life, I had my relatives over and we're doing a barbecue, and my relatives pointed out, they said, your whole family stops while the airplanes are coming over and you pick up your conversation where you drive. And we didn't know consciously we were doing it, but being so familiar with these airplanes going over, like on a Sunday afternoon, they're just buzzing in around 5, 6 o'clock at night. And I had no idea that we would stop our conversation, wait for the plane to go over, and start it like nothing happened. Yeah. But with that, and the benefit of having Metro Detroit Airport, that's a big economic engine. The same thing is that, I mean, it was probably, I think they just had the anniversary, but wasn't it late August, that trip to Phoenix, that the plane crashed over by Middle Belt on
29 years ago.
Yeah. 29. Yeah. And so, while airlines is very safe, and it's the unusual situation, nevertheless, it can happen and you got to prepare for it. And we have done drills around here that Bob's been involved with in case there was an airline accident that somehow touched or came in adjacent to Dearborn Heights.
And you're right, Dearborn Heights is in the glide path and for arrivals and departures of Metro Airport, and part of that emergency plan that you guys have is for aircraft disasters. And you have to be cognizant of that anytime that there is something like that happening. But I'm like you, I grew up in the same general area as Dearborn Heights here, and have had that same conversation with my friends from out of town as they say, why'd you stop in the middle of a storm?
I know.
Can't talk over an airplane.
I never knew we were doing that. And after they said it, I noticed that the rest of the family did the same thing. The other thing a lot of people aren't aware of is there's a lot of hazardous material that is transported by truck that we have no idea, but at any point in time, if one of those vehicles, and we do run plans to attempt to handle those situations. That's more done on a regional basis. I think there's, as I recall right, because they did assist us in one flood, but there's a group with the fire departments and the county, and I think the thing is located in Plymouth Township or something, but they can come out and clean up and secure a site that's had a tanker or some type of truck that has hazardous material that may tip, or the material might be getting out. But those are all things that we spend time as a city trying to protect as a county. And so hopefully if people take nothing else from what we were telling them, is they'll spend some time with their loved ones and do some planning.
I agree, sir, and I think that's the fundamental message that we want to get out as emergency managers, as public leaders, is be prepared.
Yeah.
They have to be cognizant of their situational awareness. In the spring, your awareness is different than in the fall. In the winter, it's different. So you have to be aware, and if you're just a little bit prepared, your chances of survival go up exponentially. And it doesn't take much to do a little bit of planning. It's not a big cost. You buy a $3 tote at the local ACO and fill it full of some of the stuff that you think you might need. It's not a big costly thing. Everybody knows where that. The biggest problem I have with my 72-hour kit is my children keep stealing batteries out of the 72-hour kit. So it always has batteries in it for the flashlights and the radios that I have in
Well,
it.
I'll share with you because I ended up, it's for third world countries, but I actually have a radio, AM, FM, shortwave, that you crank it. You get 1 hour. It was from the Crane Company. I don't know if I ought to give a plug for somebody, but you crank it up and you get 1 hour, and then you just got to crank it back up. You get another hour. I never have to worry about batteries, but I bought that as an emergency.
And you get some aerobic activity too.
Yeah, it serves both purposes. So, Mark, thank you for being a guest
My
on my
pleasure,
show, and it's been thoroughly, and I feel safer just having you, knowing that the plant is in some way, shape, or fashion under your control, as not necessarily for operational, but in case some disaster was to happen. So thank you for being a guest, and I want to thank all the residents for watching another edition of the Mayor Dan Paletko Show.